In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt amongst us, and we beheld his glory. The glory as of the risen Father, full of grace and truth. During this season, we take time to think about the incarnation, the infleshment of God. And for the bulk of Christian history, the incarnation has been the foundation of Christianity. For about 5 centuries, the incarnation was hammered out in passionate debate. It was enshrined in classical Christian creeds, and it was explored and encountered in systematic theologies. The incarnation tries to explain, as far as is possible, this idea that God became a man while still fully being God. And God entered into human time in a particular place as a particular person. And that place and that time was 1st century Palestine. Jesus Christ enters a place that is a dry tinderbox of activity. He enters 1st century Palestine under the watchful eye of the Roman Empire. He enters at a place where revolts, where dissension was only one whisper away. Jesus Christ comes at a time when religious pugilists sparred for the hearts of the people and curried the favor of Caesar. And in all of this, Christ comes to the world. He squeezes himself in the machinery of human flesh and comes as a baby. God comes as a baby. Assuming that Jesus was an average baby, he would have been perhaps 20 inches in length, 7.5 pounds. He would have had a slightly elongated head, which measured maybe a quarter the size of his body. Assuming he was an average baby, he would have been able to see about 18 inches, but his world would have been a pretty blurry place. He would have had all his muscles, but no teeth. He would have had the ability to grasp. He would have had the ability to maybe lift his head, but not much else. He would have been an average infant baby, completely helpless and dependent on his mother Mary. Jesus Christ would have been like any other baby that was born in 1st century Palestine. And yet, the claims of the gospel writers are that this was no ordinary baby. This was God in flesh. Jesus wouldn't have been born with supernatural abilities that other babies didn't have. He wouldn't have been able to see through dense objects, read people's minds, or leap tall buildings in a single bound. But when Mary would cradle Jesus in her arms, she held the creator of the world. She would cradle in her arms the one who formed her in the womb. The great creator who was uncreated enters into his own creation through the birth canal. This is heavy stuff. This is the foundation of Christianity. This is the songs and the bells and the readings that we have. God in flesh. Matthew chapter 1 and verse 23 gives, I think, a partial answer as to why God would go through such condescension. Matthew chapter 1 and verse 23 tells us, and we have sung it, that Christ came as Emmanuel, God with us. As I was writing this, I thought it was interesting that I actually zoomed into verse 23, because in Matthew 21, it tells us that he will be called Jesus and he will save us from our sins. And for the longest while, I always thought Christmas and Advent was primarily about Jesus Christ coming to save me. It was about him saving me from my sin. And I think, although that is a part of it, if we become too focused on the fact that Christ came to save us from our sin, we make the gospel too domesticated. It becomes an individual kind of act that Christ did just for us without any regard to his wider creation. But in verse 23, he tells us that God came in flesh as Emmanuel because he wanted to be with me and with you. Matthew posits presence and eminence to be the core of the incarnation. Apparently, the heart of God craves being close to the people that he has created. God wasn't just satisfied in setting things in order and being a distant landlord upstairs while his tenants downstairs suffered. So there's something about the incarnation that tells me that God has hardwired into who he is to want to be close to us. And I think it's interesting because historically we have this huge gap between the Old Testament and the New Testament. 400 years of silence. And everyone's just wondering what in the world is going on. Where are all the prophets? Where is God? And after 400 years, you have scribes poring over scrolls, trying to figure out where Jesus is? What's up with the silence of God? Then Jesus comes in flesh. The cry of Israel is answered not through text, but in flesh. And it's interesting because when I read the story of the Advent, I see, maybe it's not there, but I see it. I'll explain. There seems to be this kind of movement which shows God's desire to be proximate and to be close to the people he loves. So, the story begins, and you have people like Zechariah and you have the wise men. And it's all fuzzy. It's this big abstraction, and they are trying to figure out obscure prophecies, and they're like, well, I think Jesus is going to come, he's supposed to come soon in this place. But it's prophecies, right? And so it's almost esoteric. Not everyone can understand or see what's going on. But the story is coming. And then we get to the wise men. And the wise men see this star. They see this big, burning, gaseous thing in the night sky, and they just get on their camels and start following it. So now we've moved from just words on a scroll to something physical. There's a star, and I'm going to follow it because it's going to tell me something about this God who has been silent for so long. So they follow it. Then the story comes closer. All of a sudden, we move from this gaseous mass out in the middle of nowhere, and it comes into our atmosphere. Now we have the first flash mob ever, when a bunch of angels just appear to these shepherds on a hillside. And so now it's not just prophecies, it's not just a star in the middle of nowhere. Now we can see and we can hear something which is announcing that Jesus is coming. And then after this flash mob of angels, we get the next step. We have an actual baby that you can hear, that you can touch, that you can see. And inside this baby is poured all of the hope, all of the dreams, all of the idealism, all of the principles of a new kingdom that is to be established. And in it, God continues to draw us closer because he wants to be close to those he has created. And that is why in the gospel we find that the word becomes flesh. The word does not become newsprint. The word becomes flesh. So I'm thinking, okay, why go through all of this trouble? I'm still trying to figure this out. And this is what I came up with. In 2003, I was working as a waiter in a place called Debenhams. There's probably only one person who knows where Debenhams is, right there, right? So Debenhams is a chain store in England. A chain shop, excuse me. A shop, not a store. Okay. And in Debenhams, there was a restaurant called the Night and Day Restaurant. And I worked there. I was about 19. I earned £5.80 an hour. And I was doing pretty well for myself. I mean, I worked 20 hours a week, and I had money in my pocket. I was also in a long-distance relationship. I was 19. And by long distance, I don't mean Reading to Manchester or Newcastle. I'm talking long distance relationship. She lived in Clio, Michigan. Who knows where that is? Yeah, near Flint. There you go. So she lived in Clio, Michigan, and I lived in Reading, England. 3,750 miles. See, I knew it. Long distance. We had met through my cousin when I had come to visit him in Maryland, and we had been in our long-distance relationship for about 2 years now. So every summer I would go to America, and we would find a place, and we'd meet, 6 weeks, and then I'd be back home, and, you're just pining for each other. Pining, right? So it's been about 6 months now, and I'm just like, this is absolutely terrible. I need to see this girl. I need to see her. So I came up with a plan. This is my plan. I earn $5.80 an hour. Let me figure out how I can save enough money and go and see her in America. So I did. I saved hard. Saved about 2 months of wages. Went from Heathrow to JFK, and then from there to Huntsville International Airport. Because she was at Oakwood, right? She was in school. So I went, and I got her best friend to pick me up from the airport. Drove all the way to campus, and of course, I was a hero. I mean, if you're 19 and you do something that astounding, you are a hero. You're a certified hero. So she was just screaming her head off. She couldn't believe I was there, and I just felt great. And I was there for 4 days. I spent $1,500 to be there for 4 days. I think about this story and I wonder, what did I tell my parents to have allowed me to do something? 4 days. I got there on Thursday night. I was gone on Monday. But if someone said to you, but why would you do that? I mean, you have Skype, right? You have emails. You can call each other. You don't need the answer if you've ever been in high school and had a crush. If you've ever been in college and seen that person that you dream about and you daydream about when you're in school. And if you have money in your pocket as well. That's a bad combination. And I'm sure you have stories of things you have done in situations like that you look back on, you're like, what in the world was I thinking about? And so I think about this, and I think maybe there was something there in the heart of God that said, yes, I have come in the past as a cloud. I've come as a whirlwind. I've appeared as fire, but it's not the same. I've sprinkled things in Isaiah and Zechariah and Micah for them. There's prophecies they should know about me, but God decides that was not enough. And at a point in time, he comes and incarnates because his heart longed for his creation. There was this radical just explosion, and we had in it this entire season, this hope, this new reference for us to think about God. Like, wow, he would really do that. That's for me. And so Christ comes not as an angel, not as an avatar who can shape-shift or with cool weapons, comes as a baby. Doesn't come knowing kung fu or with super intergalactic weapons. He comes as a baby in complete humility, in solidarity with humanity, as a baby. And I think that this incarnation, this presence that Jesus Christ brought into the world, was not just so that we can sing about it, but it's a challenge to me, and I hope it's a challenge to you. When Christ brought with him his presence and then lived a life, this kingdom life, he commissioned each of us that are sitting here today, he commissioned us as his agents to cash the tokens of the incarnation in our lives and in the lives of our community. And that means that we follow Christ in carrying the presence of heaven. We follow Christ in carrying the presence of heaven in our body. It means that when people hear our footsteps, they should rejoice like the angels rejoiced when Christ was coming. Because we are, in a sense, incarnating Christ in what we do. It means that when we take these tokens of the incarnation, these tokens of blessing, we live lives where we pour liberally these blessings of the incarnation on the lives of other people. See, I'm trying not to get too mystical here, but this is profound. It means that when we take gold, like the wise men, we bless the lives of those who are under systems that have them starting on first base and not on third base. It means that those who fall on rough patches in their life, independent of their work ethic, independent of what they would like to do, we give them gold. And we bless them with tokens of the hope of the incarnation. It means that when we take frankincense, we minister to people, in a sense, as priests, as representatives of the incarnation, by sitting with them when their business is going through ruin, when their child has left the house under a cloud, when their marriage is on the rocks, when they just need a listening ear. We take myrrh and embody the incarnation when we sit with those who are grieving and those who are mourning. Because this incarnation has to be more than a cute Advent manger scene where we dote on a ruby red cheeked infant who is so quaint and cute and makes no obligations or challenges on our life. The incarnation changes everything. And it doesn't change everything in a weird, out there way, but it's close and it's personal, and it should affect each of us in the lives that we live. And I pray that this season, as we join Christ in the renewal of all things, as we join Christ in celebrating what he began and in looking forward to what is to come, we would take this challenge personally for our lives. And I'll just end by quoting the words of Saint Teresa, a nun in the 16th century. I think she captures the mandate given to us of the incarnation well. Listen to what she says. She says, Christ has nobody on earth but you. Christ has no hands but yours. Christ has no feet but yours. Christ has yours are the eyes through which he is to look with compassion into the world, and yours are the feet with which he's to go about doing good. And yours are the hands with which he is to use to bless. And I think that is the challenge of the incarnation. And that is the hope that the world, although they don't know it, wishes to see from people who identify and call themselves Christians.